Welcome back, folks, to another episode of the Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast. Tom and I are back again, and we're going to be talking about the explosion of mobile and really how it relates to having, what do we call them? Responsive design websites. Tom, maybe you can talk a little bit about what responsive design is for people who aren't familiar with it.
Well, responsive design is the new standard for a mobile website, and it basically responsive design means that your website will adapt itself to any screen size. And it's really important to think about the internet now in terms of screen sizes. And in fact, even the term mobile is a little bit of a misnomer because anyone can be mobile with pretty much any kind of computer these days. So it's really about screen size. And now with Apple announcing the iWatches and that sort of thing, screen sizes literally now are going to be as tiny as you can imagine them, a tiny little watch face, to as large as you can imagine them. I mean, literally, websites now can be blown up to arena-size displays, right? So the best way to approach that kind of variety is with a website that can adapt itself to the different screen sizes. And that's where responsive design comes in. Basically, responsive design is coding that says, well, we can see what the user is looking at this site on. We know what kind of screen size they're using. So as that site fills in the screen, it's going to look appropriate. And all the elements are going to adapt themselves to that screen size. So if you have a large photo on your home page, or a logo, or graphic, or even a menu system, all of that will adapt itself. And that's what responsive design is. And what I found with clients is that when we first use the word responsive design, they tend to forget that term right off the bat because it doesn't really make sense. But that's kind of what the industry has taken for this type of website that's available on all types of screens.
Now, there's a good example because they can go to the Intuitive Websites website. So you go to intuitivewebsites.com,
right.
And I think the acid test, if you will, is to take your browser and make it as small as you can, and you'll know if everything starts moving around, you'll know it's a responsive website. And you'll be able to see it if you look at it on your smartphone versus a tablet versus a big screen or a small screen.
Exactly, yeah.
So, I mean, really, we know the reasons why you would want to do it. Obviously, so your website looks good on every device, all the way from a phone to a big cinema display, but are there any drawbacks to responsive design?
Well, the biggest drawback that we've seen is really getting the client to understand that they have to change their site. Most sites for most businesses are still not responsive design sites. Now, the big major companies and major online players have all converted to responsive design, but most businesses' websites, they're not responsive design. And there's lots of websites out there that were just redesigned in the last couple years or so, and now the business owner is saying, oh no, I've got to redo my website again. Well, we've talked about this in the podcast. Your website's always changing, and there will always be a need to refresh and update your website, and this is one of those times. So that's probably the biggest con, is the fact that there's additional cost and time to going in and converting your site. The biggest upside is that very quickly it is a user expectation. And so what's going to happen, and we see this already in the stats, is if you don't have a mobile-ready or a device-ready responsive design website, people will just leave your site. And the numbers that we're seeing now on mobile website traffic are pretty staggering, actually. Glenn, you and I have talked about this for a long time. Even a few years ago, if we saw 15% of website visitors coming from an iPhone, we thought, wow, look at that, iPhones, oh my gosh, they're really popular. Mm-hmm. Well, we're seeing now close to 50% of traffic for many websites coming from mobile devices. And Apple leads the way. I mean, it's the media talks about Apple phones and what their popularity are. They're extremely popular. In fact, the iPhone is the most popular mobile device out there. And now with the new set of iPhones that are coming out to compete with the different sizes, I think they're even going to get more market share. And so you're really designing these things for the different types of Apple screens first, and then the second part of that would be for all the different Android phones in those screens as well.
Why do you think people still have websites that aren't mobile friendly?
Well, yeah, I think it is that idea that within the last 2 to 3 years, maybe if you can go like to the last 4 to 5 years, I would bet that the majority of businesses have redesigned their website in the last 4 or 5 years, and so now they're thinking, we just did that redesign, and now we're having to come back and do all the coding again for a new site. And another part of this issue with responsive is that some sites that are out there now just won't adapt to mobile. So stop and think about it for a second. If you designed your site with a lot of overlapping circles, let's say, or if you designed your sites with imagery and photographs that overlap or have different placement on the site, when you do a responsive design, all of that will go away because that's not going to be visible on a small screen like an iPhone screen, or even like maybe even something between an iPhone and an iPad, right? And so you have to design your site with responsive in mind, meaning that as things adapt on the screen, they've got to line up properly and make sense. Your navigation menu, for example, has to wrap properly. Your main header, your main taglines, all of that has to work. And so that's kind of another con of doing this, is you've got to put the effort back in to figuring that out.
So it's kind of like going all the way back to square one back in the day. Everything's kind of changed back.
It kind of is that, absolutely.
Well, what about e-commerce? It seems like e-commerce is getting simpler and more refined, so people can make purchases on their mobile devices. Because I don't know what the stats are. Have you heard any stats on Amazon on what they're getting as far as their traffic from mobile?
Well, the big number that's coming soon, and I'm not sure what's going to happen, is when e-commerce sales on mobile devices pass up sales on laptops or on desktops. That hasn't happened yet, but there is steady growth on e-commerce sales from mobile devices. So I think what you're going to see happening is that will continue, and at some point more purchases will be made on mobile devices than even on laptops. It's hard to even imagine that, because I remember doing a podcast with you not too long ago about talking about the fact that people just won't buy on their phone because it's too small or it's just not going to work. But we're, in our society, we're making mobile such an important part of what we do and how we operate that we expect our mobile device to be able to buy now. And in fact, we expect it to be able to buy from a retail store. And in fact, with the new payment processes that are coming out now from Apple, we're going to not only be buying from our phone, but using our phone as a credit card. So you'll go to a store and you'll say, yeah, that's the one I want. I want it in red. You don't have it in red, so I'm going to buy it on my phone. The order will go through the e-commerce channel. It'll get delivered to my house in the way I want it. And thank you so much for helping me here at the store. And it's going to be a big conundrum for the retailer, because the retailer may have just lost a sale, right? And then another part of this is that there's a big push being made right now to have retail delivery centers. So basically what will happen is you'll order something from your mobile device, and then you'll go down to the delivery store, and either that day or the next day pick up what's ordered. And the store won't be a retail store. It'll be a pickup store, like a UPS store or something like that. So mobile is changing just the way people get things, and then the other part of this too is the use of maps on mobile to find a location or find a restaurant or find something quickly. And I think for our B2B listeners, you might be thinking, well, we don't do that. We're B2B and we're very specific and very niche. Well, you have to understand that this is not only changing the retail consumer environment, it's changing the website user's expectation and how to get their needs met. And so responsive design websites are just the start of how do we engage users in whatever marketplace that we're in a mobile environment, in a must-have information world at the second I want it. And that's what we have to do, even in B2B.
Well, in B2B, you bring up a good point. One of the big things that's been going on in these questions, I'm a member of Business Marketing Association, BMA, and that's B2B marketers. And looking at that, what they talk a lot about is, hey, I travel, I'm at the airport, I'm on my phone, and I get a website. I go, hey, I need to check out a new supplier that I may be working with, or a new creative agency. Well, what they do is they go to pull it up on their phone. They just, okay, what am I looking at? They want to see it right then and there. They're not going to wait till they get back to their computer, because they're not going to be back at their laptop or their desktop maybe for another 10 hours, maybe for not for a couple days, so they can get all that information with them right then and there. You know, the other question I have for you is, I know we talk a lot about convert. We've talked about that over the last 7-8 years. Looking at it, is there a different conversion process to be looking at when you have responsive design?
Well, the conversion process on mobile becomes ultra simple and ultra simplified because you can't have a lot of options on the screen because the screens are so much smaller. You really have to know how your target market is likely to convert and have that option be at the top. And it could be as simple as a phone call. It could be as simple as a notification. It could be a buy now button with very simple options for buying now and so forth. But the best way to understand how conversions happen on your mobile device is by understanding the top preferences of your users. It could also be email. It could also be a simple form. The important thing to note, and you mentioned this too, Glenn, is that if you don't do these changes and stay on top of this stuff, your competitors will do this. So when you're in the airport or your customers in the airport and they need your services, they're going to go to the competitor because it's going to be so much easier. If they have a mobile website that's responsive or even a mobile app, that's what they're going to do.
Well, and that's something that you bring up. People talk about mobile websites. They're no longer mobile websites, and there's a huge difference between the two. Mobile websites look terrible and feel terrible. I think that's just that's my personal experience and bias talking there. An adaptive website is the new mobile, if you will, but it looks the same regardless of whether the branding's the same across any platform. It doesn't matter whether you're on a Mac using a MacBook Pro, or if you're on an iPhone, or if you're on an Android. It doesn't matter what you're using, or using a Surface, a Microsoft Surface 3. It doesn't really matter what you're using. It's going to look the same, and your branding's is the same across the board.
Absolutely, and the other part of this too is social media, because not only is the website going to be a big part of this, but they might be on a social media platform site getting your information, and for the user, that's really interchangeable. So if they're on a Google Plus site or on a Facebook or whatever, and they're getting this information, it needs to be, it needs to follow the same process. And of course, all the major social networks have responsive design sites for the most part, and those are the mobile apps that they're using.
So I know all of our listeners are probably going, wow, now I just redid my site 2 years ago, and I spent a boatload of money doing that. Now we've got to redo it for adaptive design. Are they just going to have to totally redo the website and basically launch a new website? Is that pretty much what we're doing now?
Well, the good news is that we build sites in WordPress. We've talked about the power of WordPress, and WordPress is coming out with responsive design template sites, which is just a phenomenal thing because you don't have to code for responsive design. You download the template has all the codes and features that it needs. You just organize the parts of the site that you want, the messaging and the blocks and so forth, and then the template does the rest. So no, it's not a huge investment to do this. It can be a similar cost to either building a new website, depending on how you approach it, or if your site is not entirely complicated, then it could be as little as half the cost of what it originally cost you to put your site together. So the investment is not like starting from scratch and building a brand new website. For most companies out there with a basic content site, even if you have a site that's in WordPress, it's about switching to a new template and moving the content over and organizing the site properly. That's where most of the time comes in. So, let's say you spent $5,000 4 years ago to build a WordPress site. That site could probably be transferred to responsive design for half that cost and just look absolutely great. In fact, these templates are phenomenal and save a lot of time and money.
So what can somebody expect to pay for some of these prepackaged templates on WordPress?
The prepackaged templates are the same price as the regular type templates. I mean, it's $100 or $50. They're extremely inexpensive. Where you pay for the time is for the developer to customize the template and for the custom design part. One thing that you don't want to do as a small business is go strictly 100% template. Just use a template design and, oh, I like that, and go with it, because it'll look like a template. And
Right.
because there aren't that many templates out there yet, it'll be very easy for you to have a website that looks just like your competitor's site. So it's nice to get a really good designer on board, customize a template so it's unique to you, and then launch it in a template, and then the changes are easy and the conversion's straightforward.
So, what should our viewers and listeners be looking out for as far as action items from this podcast?
Well, I'm going to introduce a new term to you, and it's going to be called a mobile web marketing plan, which is the concept of putting together your action items for mobile marketing and getting inside the head of your users and how they use their website on the go, how your site is going to be referred to others on the street or on the go or in the warehouse or on location. You have to understand that, and then once you get inside their head and do the research and look at your stats, maybe even do user testing on it, then you'll get a better idea of how to develop your strategy for a variety of screen size and also people that are on the go using the web. I think you should also look at the pros and cons of responsive design for your website, and you might find that the timing isn't right now, but we're going to get to this. Or you might find that, oh my gosh, we've got 51% of our users are coming from mobile devices. We need to get on this right away.
Right.
And then think about conversion points. And I would say limit your conversion points to 1 or 2 key areas that you'll highlight in this mobile strategy. And then just like anything else in our 4-step process, once the strategy is in place, then everything else will fall together and you can start driving and measuring traffic.
Wonderful. Well, folks, there you have it. Thank you again for joining us for another Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast. We'll see you on the next one.